The Arno moves slowly in spring. Gray. Green water catching the afternoon light just so. I watched its curves from Verrocchio's window for years, tracing how it turned a corner, the eddies forming behind a stone. The small whirlpools that lived and died within a breath. Water taught me patience, showing how force bends into grace. I drew rivers for 50 years, still sketching their flow the week my right hand refused to lift the chalk. Some things cannot be finished, only continued. This Tuscan light is not the light of Milan, nor Rome, nor France. It sits low, warm against the stone walls, thick as honey. The olive trees on my father's land held this same quality, their silver leaves trembling in the breeze. I was not quite legitimate, not quite Florentine, not quite anything, only looking, always looking. A quiet room in Verrocchio's Florentine workshop holds the soft afternoon light. Dust motes drift slowly above wooden workbenches scattered with chisels and pigment stones. The scent of linseed oil and damp clay lingers in the still air. A partially carved stone figure rests near a window overlooking the Arno River. Cool stone walls absorb the distant sounds of the city street below. Sunlight warms the worn surface of a large drafting table. Shavings of walnut wood curl at the edge, smelling sharp and resinous. He once calculated that a single river, eddy, completes 7 full rotations before dissolving. This knowledge lived in my fingers as I mixed the blue for the distant hills, watching how light pooled in the hollows of a neck. Verrocchio gave me the left angel on the baptism panel, a quiet corner where no one expected much. I painted slowly, studying the collarbone's shadow, the way fabric gathered at the shoulder. When he saw it, he set his brush down. Never touched that panel again. I understood later it was the water in the angel's eyes, the living reflection. Vinci sits above the valley. Stone and terrace and old olive trees worn smooth by centuries of wind. My grandfather Antonio's house. My father came and went on notary business, leaving me among the vineyards. An illegitimate child in a notary's household. That was me. But no one made much of it in the countryside. I was simply the boy who drew birds, who stood too long watching water move around a stone. The soft afternoon light filtered through the olive trees, dappling the stone walls. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wild thyme and sun, warmed earth across the terraced fields. Distant hills blurred into a hazy blue, their contours softened by the lingering heat. The rhythmic chirping of cicadas filled the air, steady beneath the occasional call of a bird. My father saw the drawings. He saw something in them. Not art, precisely. Something more necessary than that. He took me to Florence when I was perhaps 15. Stone dust. Bronze filings. The smell of turpentine and horse hide glue. 40 apprentices learning to see with their hands. Verrocchio thought with his fingers. He was a goldsmith, a sculptor, a painter. The close Luce estate garden near Amboise rests in the late afternoon. Stone pathways wind past orderly rows of herbs and fruit trees. Sunlight filters gently through the leaves of ancient chestnut trees. A small stone bench faces a quiet pond reflecting the pale sky. The air carries the faint scent of rosemary and damp earth. Distant birdsong blends with the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Water trickles steadily from a simple carved stone fountain nearby. Shadows lengthen slowly across the well, tended grass. A single chair sits empty beside a low wooden writing table. The peaceful space invites quiet contemplation. This garden offered solace. The Virgin of the Rocks emerged from rock studies, the water's truth shaping the figures. Each apostle's face in the Last Supper held the tension of a heartbeat learned from dissection, sfumato layered like breath on glass. I worked until the hand trembled. The garden offered solace during Leonardo's final years in France. The Arno still moves. Vinci sits above the valley. Stone and terrace and old olive trees worn smooth by centuries of wind. My grandfather Antonio's house stood solid against the hillside, its walls thick enough to hold the cool of night long into the day. My father came and went on notary business, his boots dusty from the road to Florence. An illegitimate child in a notary's household. That was me. But no one made much of it in the countryside. I was simply the boy who drew birds, who stood too long watching water move around a stone. The air carried the scent of crushed sage and damp earth after rain. Cicadas hummed in the afternoon heat, a steady vibration against the silence of the fields. My mother Caterina worked the small plot behind the house, her hands stained with soil from the vegetable beds. She spoke little of where she came from, though sometimes I caught her looking toward the east with a distant expression. Her skin held the warm tone of sun-baked clay, her hair dark and tightly braided. I remember the weight of her hand on my shoulder as we walked the narrow path to the well. The stone rim felt cool beneath my fingers, the water below dark and still. My father saw the drawings I made in the margins of his account books. He saw something in them. Not art, precisely. something more necessary than that. He took me to Florence when I was perhaps 15, to Andrea del Verrocchio's workshop on the Via dei Servi. Stone dust, bronze filings, the smell of turpentine and horse hide glue. 40 apprentices learning to see with their hands. Verrocchio was a goldsmith, a sculptor, a painter, a man who thought with his fingers. He gave me the left angel on the Baptism of Christ panel. Far corner, not the important position. I painted it slowly. I was studying the neck, the specific quality of light along the collarbone, the angle of the shoulder blade beneath thin fabric, the way a breeze might lift a strand of hair. My brush moved in tiny circles, layering glaze so thin it barely caught the light. When he saw what I had done, he set his own brush down. He did not paint again on that panel. I did not understand this at the time. Later I understood. The workshop smelled of linseed oil and beeswax each morning. Sunlight entered through high windows, illuminating dust motes above the long workbenches. Tools lay scattered, chisels with worn handles, metal calipers for measuring proportions, fine brushes with sable tips. A half-carved wooden saint stood near the door, its surface rough under my fingertips. The sound of mallets tapping stone provided a steady rhythm beneath the quiet murmur of apprentices mixing pigments. Verrocchio moved among us, his hands stained with ochre and charcoal. He showed me how to stretch canvas over wooden frames, how to grind lapis lazuli into powder for blue. I learned to cast bronze by watching the molten metal flow into sand molds. My hands grew calloused from handling chisels, my nails stained with walnut ink. The city outside buzzed with merchants shouting in the streets, carts rattling over cobblestones. But inside, time slowed to the pace of careful observation. I measured the distance between pupils, the curve of an earlobe. I traced the veins in a leaf until I knew its pattern by heart. Some mornings I stood at the window, watching the Arno flow past. The water carried bits of straw and twigs downstream, swirling around rocks before continuing its journey. I sketched these eddies in my notebook, the way light fractured on the surface. The river taught me patience, how movement contains stillness, how water remembers the shape of the stone it passes. My mother's hands worked the soil with the same quiet persistence. I once asked her why she never spoke of her childhood. She only smoothed the earth around a young olive sapling, her knuckles white with effort. The earth held its secrets tightly. So did she. The workshop became my second home. I slept in a small room above the studio, the floorboards creaking under my weight. My bed was narrow, the straw mattress lumpy beneath thin blankets. Each night, I traced the cracks in the ceiling with my eyes, imagining rivers flowing through stone. Dawn brought the clang of the blacksmith's hammer from the street below. I rose before the others, lighting a candle to study my sketches by its weak flame. Verrocchio noticed this habit. He began leaving small tasks for me before the day's work began. A broken hinge to repair, a drawing to copy. He taught me to mix pigments with egg yolk for tempera, the colors binding to the wood with a matte finish. I learned to layer colors slowly, building depth through transparency. The angel's face emerged from these layers, the skin tones softening into shadow. I studied how light fell across a cheekbone, how it pooled in the hollow of a throat. The panel took months. My fingers ached from holding the brush steady. My eyes strained in the dim light. But the figure felt alive beneath my hand. Verrocchio stood behind me. One afternoon as I worked on the angel's robe, the fabric needed to suggest movement, the way cloth folds over a bent knee. I mixed a thin wash of vermilion over dried layers, watching the color deepen gradually. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his thumb brushing the back of my neck. No words passed between us. The gesture said enough. Later, I learned he had not touched that panel again. He let my hand finish what his had begun. The air in the workshop grew thick with heat as summer approached. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I carved a small wooden angel for a church commission. My chisel slipped, nicking the edge of the wing. Verrocchio examined the damage without anger. He showed me how to sand the wood smooth, then layer gesso to rebuild the surface. Mistakes were part of the work. They shaped what came next. I watched him cast a bronze candlestick, the molten metal glowing orange in the crucible. He poured it slowly, the liquid metal filling the mold with a soft hiss. The process fascinated me. The transformation from solid to liquid and back again. I began sketching the flow of metal, the way it sought the lowest point. These studies led me to observe water more closely. I followed streams outside the city walls, noting how currents branched around obstacles. My notebooks filled with diagrams of vortices and wave patterns. The city's canals became my laboratory. I dropped twigs into the water, timing how long they took to pass certain points. I measured the speed of flow against the depth of the channel. These observations stayed with me long after I left the workshop. They shaped how I painted rivers in later years The way water bends light, how it carries sediment that colors its depth. One morning Verrocchio handed me a human skull from his collection. It had come from a pauper's grave, the bones pale and smooth. He wanted me to draw the structure, the way the eye sockets framed the nasal cavity. My hand trembled slightly as I traced the curves. The bone felt cold and dense, heavier than I expected. I studied the sutures where plates joined, the hollow space behind the teeth. This was my first close encounter with the architecture of flesh. I returned to the skull many times, sketching it from different angles. The workshop kept a small garden for medicinal herbs. I often sat there during breaks, watching bees move between rosemary and lavender. The scent of crushed thyme clung to my clothes. Apprentices gathered there to eat bread and cheese, their hands stained with paint. We spoke of nothing important: the price of pigments, the master's latest commission. But the conversations felt substantial, rooted in the work we shared. My father visited occasionally, his eyes scanning the studio with quiet pride. He never asked about my future, but I saw the questions in his gaze. Would I stay in Florence? Would I become a master in my own right? I had no answers then. Only the next brushstroke, the next sketch. The city felt vast and unknowable beyond the workshop walls. I walked its streets at dusk, watching how shadows lengthened across stone facades. The light changed hour by hour, shifting from gold to violet as the sun set. I memorized these transitions, storing them for future paintings. My feet knew the path to the river, the bridge where fishermen cast their lines. The water moved steadily, carrying leaves and small branches downstream. I stood there for hours, observing how the current split around pilings. The Arno taught me about persistence, how even the smallest stream can carve stone, given enough time. My hands learned the weight of different tools, the heft of a chisel, the flexibility of a fine brush. Calluses formed on my fingertips from holding charcoal. My clothes were permanently stained with pigments: blue from lapis, red from madder root. These stains became part of me, like the lines on my palms. The workshop held a quiet rhythm, each day unfolding with predictable tasks. But beneath the surface, ideas stirred. I began experimenting with layered glazes, building color slowly through thin applications. This technique allowed light to penetrate the paint, creating depth from within. I called it sfumato, the soft blending of tones like smoke. It took patience, waiting for each layer to dry before applying the next. The air in Verrocchio's workshop held the scent of linseed oil and ground pigments, sharp and earthy. Dust motes swirled in the single shaft of morning light, falling across worn workbenches. I remember the rhythmic scrape of charcoal on paper, the distant clang of stone mallets outside. A half-finished clay model stood near a basin of water, its surface reflecting the quiet room. This space nurtured generations through patient, daily practice. I learned to see the world anew here, my hands covered in charcoal dust before breakfast. The stone dust clung to my skin, gritty against my palms. Bronze filings glittered like tiny stars on the floor. Verrocchio gave me the left angel on the baptism panel, a corner position meant for apprentices. I painted slowly, studying the neck, the light along the collarbone. He saw my work and set his brush down. He never touched that panel again. Some things are understood without words. The workshop taught me to watch water move around a stone. I counted 27 layers on the Mona, Lisa's veil years later, each one thinner than a spider's thread. My brushes became extensions of my eyes, seeking the truth beneath the surface. Sfumato was not merely a technique. It was how the world actually appeared to a tired eye at dusk. Light does not cut sharply from shadow. It breathes into it, soft and slow. I conducted experiments with candlelight in darkened rooms, watching how flames bled into the air. The quality of light changed with the hour, the season, the dust in the atmosphere. I mixed pigments with walnut oil, applying them in layers so thin they barely registered. 10 layers might cover what another artist did in one. My fingers learned the weight of translucence. The Mona Lisa's face emerged from this patient build-up. Her smile held within the air itself. Her expression shifted depending on where you stood, like water catching the sun. This came from understanding the muscles beneath the skin, how they moved with thought. I dissected faces in candlelit rooms, tracing the paths of nerves and tendons. The smell of vinegar and spirits lingered long after. Her landscape background reflected the eroded river valleys I knew from Vinci. I saw the strata in rock faces. The way fossils told stories of ancient seas. The garden at Clos Luce rests in the late afternoon light. Stone pathways wind past orderly rows of rosemary and thyme. Sunlight filters through the leaves of ancient chestnut trees, dappled and soft. A small stone bench faces a quiet pond, reflecting the pale sky. The air carries the scent of damp earth and crushed herbs. Water trickles steadily from a simple carved fountain, a constant rhythm. Shadows stretch slowly across the grass, merging with the cool shade. A single chair sits empty beside a low wooden table, scattered with papers. Distant birdsong blends with the rustle of leaves in the breeze. This garden offered solace during my final years in France. It was a place to observe without urgency. My studies of water began in the Arno's currents near Florence. I watched how eddies formed behind stones, how small whirlpools danced and dissolved. The flow of rivers taught me hydraulics, the push and pull of fluid dynamics. Paintings like The Virgin of the Rocks show this knowledge. The water around the figures is not merely decorative. It swirls with the logic of real currents, reflecting light with liquid, truth. I filled notebooks with sketches of turbulent flows, noting how air mixed with water. The reflective surfaces came from hours spent staring into basins, tracing the distortions. Light bends in water. I saw it happen, recorded it, then painted it. The rocks in that painting are not invented. They mirror the geological formations I studied in the Apennines. I recognized fossils embedded in stone, understood how layers built over centuries. The eroded cliffs and distant vistas in my landscapes stem from walking those hills, feeling the rock under my fingers. The cool, damp smell of limestone seeped into my clothes. I noted how rain carved channels, how wind wore surfaces smooth. Every brush stroke aimed to reveal underlying universal principles. True knowledge came from direct sensory experience. I believed the artist must become a patient witness to nature's mechanics. This philosophy guided both my art and my investigations. The Last Supper captured a moment charged with human tension. Each apostle reacted individually, yet formed a cohesive group. This balance came from observing people in markets and taverns, studying how grief or shock moved across a face. I dissected expressions as carefully as muscles. The composition used mathematical perspective, but the emotion felt utterly real. Time seems measured in the slow drying of paint layers here. A partially carved stone figure rests near a window overlooking the Arno River. Cool stone walls absorb the distant sounds of the city street below. Sunlight warms the worn surface of a large drafting table. Shavings of walnut wood lie beside a half-finished model. Silence settles heavily, broken only by the scratch of charcoal. The space feels suspended, focused only on the patient work of creation. Bird flight fascinated me as a boy in Vinci. I watched swallows dart and pivot, their wings cutting the air. Later, I studied wing structures in detail. sketching tendons and feathers under candlelight. These observations informed the wings of angelic figures. They were not merely decorative. They followed aerodynamic principles. The curve of a wing, the angle of descent, the tension in flight muscles. All were rendered with anatomical precision. My sketches of avian mechanics became the basis for figures that seemed poised to lift off the canvas. The air itself had weight and resistance, something I felt on my skin during hilltop observations. I designed flying machines based on these studies, though they never left the page. The notebooks became repositories of relentless curiosity. They contained studies ranging from human anatomy to the flow of water and the flight of birds. Every page held mirror writing, a habit born of working late into the night. My left hand learned to form letters backwards, a quiet rebellion against convention. The ink sometimes smudged on my palm, leaving a blue stain that lasted days. These pages were not separate from my paintings. They were the foundation, the slow accumulation of seeing. Each brushstroke carried the weight of prior observation and recorded data. I revised understanding based on new evidence, scraping back paint to reveal truer forms beneath. This required immense patience, a willingness to admit error. Many contemporaries relied on established conventions, but I sought the world as it presented itself. The Virgin of the Rocks showcases my understanding of light within water and rock formations. Its figures emerge from shadow with atmospheric clarity. The geological accuracy lent the sacred scene tangible reality. My studies of human anatomy informed the physical presence of every figure. Muscles and bone structure were rendered with quiet confidence. This integration defined my mature style completely. I approach painting as a branch of natural philosophy. The sfumato technique, perfected through optical research, became central to portraiture. It lent figures an enigmatic presence, as if emerging from soft, enveloping air. The Mona Lisa remains the most celebrated example of this subtlety. Her expression shifts gently, depending on perspective and distance. This effect resulted from my grasp of facial structure and light interaction. She remained in my studio for decades, refined across many years. I carried her with me when I traveled to France. The Louvre now houses this work, though its fame grew long after I was gone. The workshop traditions were important, but I moved beyond them. My style became grounded in empirical study, in seeing the world as it truly was. I began painting the Mona Lisa during my extended stay in Florence. I worked on her intermittently over many years, continuing until my hands could no longer hold the brush steadily. Her landscape background reflects my geological observations of eroded river valleys. The subtle modeling of her face utilized my understanding of light and shadow. This technique created soft transitions mimicking natural vision. The painting remained with me constantly, a companion through changing cities. French King Francis, I acquired it after my passing. He held me in high esteem during my final years near Amboise. His patronage allowed me to work without constraint. The air in the estate garden carried the faint scent of rosemary and damp earth. Distant bird song blended with the rustle of leaves. Water trickled steadily from a simple carved fountain nearby. Shadows lengthened slowly across the grass. A single chair sat empty beside a low wooden table. This peaceful space invited quiet contemplation. It was a place to rest the eyes after long hours of study. My scientific notebooks contained countless inventions alongside artistic studies. I designed flying machines based on bird flight observations. These conceptual devices reflected relentless curiosity about natural phenomena. My anatomical drawings revealed intricate details of the human body. They supported both medical understanding and artistic representation. I explored optics, mechanics, and hydraulics with equal dedication. Each field informed my artistic practice in subtle, integrated ways. My approach fused empirical observation with creative application seamlessly. The synthesis of disciplines defined my mature philosophy. Later artists studied my techniques and compositions carefully. Scholars continue to analyze my works and manuscripts today. My legacy rests upon this unique integration. The paintings remain celebrated for their beauty and profound observation. The notebooks reveal the meticulous process behind every decision. I documented thoughts and findings with relentless thoroughness. This was my life's parallel work, as essential as the paintings themselves. The scientific curiosity permeated nearly every aspect of my visual representation. Detailed studies of fluid dynamics informed realistic water scenes. Paintings, like the Virgin of the Rocks, showcase this knowledge. His analysis of geological formations contributed to authentic mountain landscapes. He recognized the origins of fossils through careful fieldwork. Similarly, observations of bird flight mechanics influenced depictions of wings. Detailed sketches provided the basis for naturalistic angelic figures. This attention resulted in wings portrayed with anatomical precision. The synthesis elevated artistic representation. Understanding body mechanics or light physics served the artist's vision. This integration defined mature practice. The river's movement taught me patience. I drew rivers for 50 years. Still drew them. The week I could no longer lift my right hand. Some things cannot be finished, only continued. The olive trees on my father's land held a particular light. Lo, warm against the stone walls. This Tuscan light is not the light of Milan, nor Rome, nor France. It is particular. I was not quite legitimate, not quite Florentine, not quite anything, only looking, always looking. The Arno moves slowly in spring. I watched it from Verrocchio's window. Gray-green water, catching the afternoon light. How a river turns a corner. The eddies behind a stone. The small whirlpools that form and dissolve. The Arno moves slowly in spring. I watched it from Verrocchio's window. Gray-green water catching the afternoon light. How a river turns a corner. The eddies behind a stone. Small whirlpools forming and dissolving. I drew rivers for 50 years. Still drew them the week I could no longer lift my right hand. Some things cannot be finished, only continued. This Tuscan light is not the light of Milan, nor of Rome, nor of France. It is particular. Lo, warm against the stone walls. The olive trees on my father's land held this same quality. I was not quite legitimate, not quite Florentine, not quite anything, only looking, always looking. Ludovico Sforza summoned me to Milan with promises of bronze and patronage. His court glittered with tapestries and the scent of beeswax polish on marble floors. I arrived carrying notebooks filled with water studies, my fingers stained with charcoal. The Duke wanted a monument to his father, a horse larger than any living man. We measured the courtyard with pacing strides, the dust rising in golden clouds around our boots. I sketched the musculature of stallions in the stables, their hides steaming in the cold air. The clay model grew taller than a man, 16 feet of damp earth and straw. I smoothed its flanks with wet hands, feeling the curve of ribs beneath my palms. Birds mistook the model's back for a perch and left white droppings on the neck. The bronze was delayed year after year by wars and taxes. Then the French came with their cannons. My horse never cast, only continued in sketches. A single shaft of light falls through the high window of the Sforza stables. Dust swirls above an overturned wooden bucket, its rim chipped from years of use. The scent of dry hay and horse sweat lingers thick in the air. A discarded bridle rests on a bale of straw, leather cracked from age. Stone walls hold the chill of early morning, absorbing the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Cool air brushes against the skin near the open doorway. Sunlight catches the fine hairs on a forgotten grooming brush. The refectory at Santa Maria del Grazie smelled of fresh plaster and damp stone. I chose the north wall for its steady light, though the monks complained of the chill. My assistants mixed pigments in earthen bowls, the scent of crushed lapis, lazuli sharp in the still air. I painted slowly, layering glazes of walnut oil and powdered minerals. The apostles' faces emerged from shadow, their eyes reflecting candlelight I had studied for weeks. Judas clutched his bag of coins, the leather textured under my brush. The bread on the table looked real enough to tear apart, but the wall was flawed. The plaster dried too fast, trapping moisture from the monks, cooking fires below. Within months, the paint began to flake like old skin. I watched a piece fall near Peter's elbow, revealing the rough brick beneath. The Duke's priorities shifted to fortifying the castle against invaders. My brushes gathered dust in their jars. The Last Supper remained unfinished, its story incomplete. History moved faster than pigment could set. Some works are not abandoned. They simply wait. The Duke's secretary brought orders sealed with red wax. Cavalry needed shoeing. Cannons required casting. My notebooks filled with sketches of gears and flying machines instead. I traced the veins on a dead leaf, noting how they branched like rivers. The same pattern appeared in the cracks, spreading across the refectory wall. During a dissection in the winter of 1493, I found a man's heart valves sealed shut with a substance like hardened tree sap. The skin on his wrists was thin as parchment. This explained his sudden collapse in the marketplace. I recorded the finding in my notebook beside a sketch of a water pump. The refectory's north wall now holds only ghosts of color. Faint outlines linger where paint once clung. Cold air seeps through cracks in the stone, carrying the smell of mildew from the monastery gardens. A single wooden bench sits askew near the door, its surface worn smooth by generations of hands. Sunlight slants across the floor, illuminating dust motes above the empty space where the table once stood. Damp patches bloom like maps on the lower stones. The silence is broken only by the distant toll of a bell. Milan's streets echoed with the scrape of carts and the cries of fishmongers. I walked them often, my cloak pulled tight against the Lombard wind. The Sforza castle loomed above the city, its towers stark against the gray sky. In my studio, sketches covered every surface: wings, gears, hydraulic screws. A model of a flying machine hung from the rafters, its bat like membrane stretched over willow ribs. I tested it on the castle roof, watching it catch air for 3 seconds before crashing into the courtyard. The Duke laughed, his breath fogging in the cold. But his laughter faded when the French banners appeared on the horizon. Soldiers requisitioned my bronze for cannonballs. My workshop was cleared for armories. I packed my notebooks into wooden boxes, the leather covers rough under my fingertips. Projects dissolved like sugar in water. The bronze horse became scrap metal. The flying machine gathered dust in a corner. Only the sketches survived, carried in my arms like children. 17 years in Milan. 17 years of waiting for the next commission, the next patron's whim. My hands learned to hold tools lightly, knowing they might be taken away. A chipped ceramic bowl rests on a windowsill in the French countryside. It holds dried lavender stems, their purple faded to gray. Morning light reveals hairline cracks along the rim, mended long ago with iron wire. The scent is faint but persistent, mixed with wood smoke from a distant hearth. Cool stone walls absorb the sound of wind in the oak trees outside. A single bee buzzes against the glass pane, trapped between seasons. The bowl's glaze is uneven, pooling thickly in the bottom. Rome called me with promises of papal favor. I traveled south, my bones aching from the carriage ride. The Vatican garden smelled of orange blossoms and damp earth. Pope Leo admired my notebooks, but wanted frescoes on chapel walls. I studied the light filtering through cypress trees, noting how it fractured on marble steps. But the Pope's secretary preferred quicker artists. My ideas moved too slowly for their haste. I sketched the flow of the Tiber instead, the water swirling around bridge pilings. My hands trembled now, making fine lines difficult. I filled pages with observations of sleep, how eyelids flutter, how breath deepens in the hour before dawn. The body knows rest better than any man. I watched servants nap in the shade, their faces peaceful in the dust. My own projects grew smaller, a treatise on water, studies of facial muscles. The grand visions remained trapped in clay and ink. History is made by men who finish things. I was always a man of beginnings. While dissecting a drowned sailor near Florence, I noted how his lungs held salt water, but his stomach was empty. The sea had washed out his last meal. This detail helped me understand the mechanics of drowning for my treatise on water. The study at Clos Lucier holds the soft light of late afternoon. Sunbeams cut through motes of dust above an oak desk. A quill lies beside an open notebook, its nib stained with iron gal ink. The scent of beeswax and old paper fills the still air. A half-carved wooden sphere rests near the window, its surface smooth from handling. Distant sounds of birdsong drift through the open shutters. Stone walls retain the coolness of the earth beneath. A single feather floats in a basin of rainwater. France offered me a quiet house and a king who listened. Francis was young, his hands restless with energy. He brought my notebooks to the palace gardens, turning pages with reverence. We spoke of water wheels and bird flight, his breath visible in the winter air. I showed him how light bends in raindrops, making rainbows. He understood little but admired the effort. My hands grew weaker, the right one useless for painting. I dictated notes to assistants, my voice a dry whisper. The king provided pens and paper, asking no deadlines. In the garden, I watched bees navigate clover fields, their flight paths precise as compass lines. Sleep came easier here, undisturbed by patrons or wars. I dreamed of rivers and horses, the clay model standing whole in a field. I remember the way Lisa Aradini's earlobe caught the light, that small curve where shadow met flesh, soft as a petal. She sat patiently in the Florentine studio, her hands folded in her lap. The scent of linseed oil and walnut shavings clung to the air. Sunlight streamed through the high window, warming the stone sill. I studied the delicate fold where her ear met the jawline. Each session lasted no more than an hour. Her husband commissioned the portrait, but grew impatient. I worked slowly, layer by layer. The sfumato required it. Thin glazes of ochre and umber, mixed with egg yolk. 30 layers for the skin alone. Each needed 3 weeks to dry before the next touch. Her smile emerged not from joy, but from the orbicularis oris muscle beneath. I had traced that muscle in cadavers, counting its fibers. The river valley outside mirrored her distant gaze. Eroded cliffs, shaped by centuries of water. I saw the same patience in stone. She never finished sitting for me. The portrait stayed with me always. Cool stone walls absorbed the city's distant cries. A half-carved river god figure rested near the Arno window. Sunlight pooled on the drafting table's worn surface. Charcoal sticks lay scattered beside walnut shavings. The silence held the weight of years, time measured in drying paint and shifting light. This room taught me to see water's path around stone, to notice how shadow pooled in hollows. Her landscape background took shape here, not imagined, but remembered from riverbanks near Vinci. The clay basin held muddy water for cleaning brushes. Its surface caught reflections of passing clouds. I watched those ripples for hours. They taught me how light bends in humid air, how distance softens edges. The studio smelled of damp earth and turpentine. A single fly buzzed near the window ledge. Its wings caught the afternoon sun like tiny prisms. This quiet space held all I needed. I carried the panel to France wrapped in oiled linen. The king's men helped me over the Alps. Snow clung to the pine boughs near Amboise. My hands ached from the cold, but not from the weight. The painting felt light as a breath. Francis visited often at Clos Lucé. He admired the smile's mystery, called it a living thing. I showed him my bird-wing sketches by candlelight, the veins in a sparrow's feather, how air currents lift a heron's wing. He understood wonder. We walked the gardens after dusk. The chestnut trees whispered overhead. Moonlight silvered the herb rows. My dissection notes stayed packed in my trunk. They held truths no patron demanded. The heart's chambers, the way tears form at the inner eye. These things mattered more than courtly praise. I added one final glaze to her cheekbone, just a whisper of light. It took 2 weeks to dry in the French spring air. Stone pathways wound past sage and thyme in the late garden. A small pond reflected the pale sky like polished lead. Ancient chestnut leaves filtered the afternoon sun. Their shadows danced on the water's surface. I sat on the mossy bench each evening. The air carried the scent of wet earth and crushed mint. Dragonflies skimmed the pond's edge. Their wings made no sound against the stillness. This quiet place held no urgency, only the slow settling of light. The king's library held my notebooks filled with water studies. How currents carve rock over centuries. How fog forms in river valleys. My hands traced the paper's rough texture. Each line recalled a specific moment, a raindrop on a leaf, the curve of a fish's tail. The Mona Lisa leaned against the wall nearby, her smile unchanged by the journey. I never delivered her to the merchant's family. She belonged to the work itself. The sfumato technique demanded absolute stillness. I mixed pigments with my own breath to thin them. A single cough could ruin a layer. Her eyes held the color of the Arno at dawn, greenish-gray with flecks of gold. I studied how light pooled in the hollow above her collarbone, like water in a shallow basin. My dissections revealed why skin sags near the throat. 17 muscles anchor the jaw. Each affects expression. Her smile lived in the levator labii, not joy, but quiet observation. She watched me as I watched her. The studio grew dark each session. We lit beeswax candles. Their smoke curled toward the ceiling beams. The scent mingled with lamp oil and clay. Distant church bells marked the hours. Her husband sent letters asking for completion. I never answered. The portrait needed time. More time than any man could give. French winters felt damp against the skin. I worked in a small room at Clos Lucé. Stone walls held the chill. A brazier glowed in the corner, scenting the air with apple wood smoke. The painting rested on an easel near the window. Morning light touched her forehead first, then the curve of her nose, finally her lips. I adjusted the sfumato where shadow met light. each layer thinner than the last, like mist over a lake. The king brought me fossils from his travels, spiral shells embedded in stone. He called them proof of God's hand. I saw rivers that had turned to rock, centuries of water shaping the land. My landscapes mirrored this truth, distant mountains eroded by wind and rain. The same forces that shape a face. Time leaves its mark softly. Without fanfare, I added a final glaze to the background river, just a hint of blue over gray. Sunlight warmed the wooden model of a flying machine on my desk. Its wings were crafted from thin birch bark, feathers glued in precise overlapping rows. I tested it near the pond each spring. It never flew far, but the motion taught me how air moves. Like the sfumato on Lisa's cheek, the king's physicians brought me cadavers. I dissected hands to study tendon movement, how the thumb opposes the fingers. 20 dissections over 10 years, notes filled with sketches of bone and sinew. These truths informed every brushstroke, the way fabric folds over a knee, how light catches a knuckle. Fame meant little here. Only the work held weight. The Mona Lisa remained my constant companion. Through illness, through failing eyesight, her smile never wavered. I carried her from Florence to Amboise. She was my only finished thought. The garden pond held the sky's reflection, perfectly still. Dragonflies landed on lily pads without a ripple. Their wings glistened with dew. Stone pathways curved toward a quiet orchard. Apples hung heavy on gnarled branches. The scent of ripe fruit mixed with damp soil. I traced the bench's worn surface with my fingers. Moss grew in the cracks between stones. Evening light turned the pond to liquid silver. A single leaf floated on the surface. Its journey slow and inevitable, this peace was earned through patience, like the layers of paint on her face. Each session with Lisa taught me stillness, how to wait for the right light, how to see what others miss. The king respected this slowness. He never asked for completion, only understood the work required time, more time than any of us possessed. I added no final touches. The painting was always becoming, like the river shaping stone, like the years shaping memory. Her smile remains exactly as it was, not a mystery but a moment held close. The work outlasts everything, even the hand that made it. The stone bench in the close, Luce garden faces the pond. Its surface bears the smooth hollows worn by years of quiet sitting. I traced those curves with my left hand this morning, the knuckles stiff but the touch familiar. Water lilies float on the pond's surface, their pale petals reflecting the sky's soft blue. A dragonfly skimmed the water, wings catching the light like thin glass. The scent of rosemary drifted from the herb beds, sharp and clean against the damp earth smell, rising from the pond's edge. I watched the ripples spread and fade. Such small disturbances hold the whole sky within them. Salai brought my cloak when the breeze turned cool. He placed it gently over my shoulders without a word. His hands were rough from handling tools, yet his touch remained light. He understood silence better than most. The garden held its peace long. After the court's noise faded, Melzi sat nearby, mending a page in one of my notebooks with fine linen thread. His fingers moved with careful precision, the ink stains on his knuckles, permanent marks of his devotion. A single sparrow hopped across the stone path, pecking at crumbs Salai had scattered. The bird's head tilted, one bright eye considering me. I remembered the cages I kept as a boy in Vinci, the frantic beating of small wings against wood and wire. the way the sparrow's eyes darted toward any opening. I could not bear to hear them after a while, so I opened the doors, watched them vanish into the olive groves. Their freedom felt necessary, a small justice. Francis, I granted me 10,000 lira annually. The sum felt immense, yet it covered only the cost of pigments and assistance, vermilion from crushed insects, lapis lazuli ground to dust for blue. The king understood little of what true seeing required. He saw paintings as treasures, not as questions made visible. Salai often joked about the king's generosity, his laugh easy and warm. But Melzi worried over the accounts, his brow furrowed as he calculated expenses in the margins of his notes. They both stayed close, these two boys who became my anchors. Salai brought me bread and olives from the kitchen. Melzi mixed my paints with the right amount of walnut oil. Their presence was a steady rhythm, like the fountain's trickle. Cool stone floors met my feet as I entered the study. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, falling through the high windows. The rough grain of the wooden writing table felt solid beneath my palms. My left hand still obeyed, though the right refused its duty. Melzi had arranged the notebooks just so, the pages fanned open to sketches of water vortices. The ink lines were precise, mirroring the swirls. I'd watched for hours in the Arno's currents. Salai leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. He wore that old green jacket I'd given him years ago, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. His eyes held a quiet amusement, as if he knew a secret no one else did. The room smelled of beeswax and old paper. Somewhere, a clock ticked with slow, even beats. I filled my notebooks with mirror writing. The habit began when I needed to keep notes private from prying eyes in Verrocchio's workshop. Now it felt natural, as if my hand knew the truth flowed better backward. Melzi learned to read it effortlessly, turning the pages toward the light to decipher my thoughts. He copied passages into regular script for others, his own hand neat and careful. Salai never bothered with the writing. He preferred the drawings, the studies of birds in flight, the sketches of old men's faces lined by time. He'd trace the lines with his finger, feeling the movement captured on the page. One evening, he found a page showing a caged bird. He left it open on the table for days. No words were spoken. The pond reflected the afternoon sky, a perfect mirror broken only by the fountain's steady drip. Water rose in a small arc from the carved stone mouth, fell with a soft plink into the basin below. Each drop created concentric circles that expanded until they touched the lilies. The sound was constant, a low hum beneath the bird song. My chair faced this scene, the wood smooth from years of use. A single leaf floated on the water's surface, turning slowly with the current. The air held the scent of wet stone and crushed mint from the path. Shadows stretched long across the grass, deepening the green. This spot offered rest without sleep, a place where observation felt like breathing. Salai slept in the room next to mine. I'd hear him stir in the night, pacing when sleep wouldn't come. Sometimes he'd stop outside my door, silent for a long moment. He never entered unless summoned. Melzi was different. He kept vigil during my worst fevers, cooling my brow with cloths dipped in well water. His hands were always calm, never hurried. I remember the cool weight of the cloth, the faint smell of chamomile steeped in the basin. He spoke little, but his presence was a solid thing, like the stone walls. Salai brought laughter into the quiet rooms, a sudden burst like a bird taking flight. Melzi brought order, the careful arrangement of tools and papers. Both understood the work. Neither tried to fill the silence with noise. My father sent me to Florence as a boy. Ser Piero, the notary, knew the workshop would shape me. Verrocchio's studio smelled of stone dust and hot metal. Bronze filings coated every surface, gritty underfoot. I learned to carve marble, the vibration of the chisel running up my arm, but paint felt truer in my hand. The baptism of Christ panel held my first angel. Verrocchio gave me the corner, thinking it safe. I painted the curve of the neck, the way light gathered in the hollow, above the collarbone. When he saw it, he set his brush down, never touched that panel again. He knew I saw differently, saw the living thing beneath the skin. The caged birds I kept as a young man in Milan taught me patience. I watched them for hours, noting how their feathers caught the light when they turned, the way their throats pulsed as they sang. I fed them crushed seeds and bits of apple. One sparrow grew tame, hopping onto my finger, but its eyes always scanned for escape. After a month, I opened the cage. It didn't leave at once. Sat on the sill, head cocked, then vanished in a flash of brown. I never replaced it. The empty cage hung in the window for years, a silent lesson. Melzi transcribed my notes on hydraulics, his script clear and even. He understood the principles of water flow, as well as I did, the way eddies form behind obstacles, how currents deepen in the center. He'd point to a sketch and ask, "Does this match what you saw at the Adda?" His questions were precise, born of real curiosity, not the idle chatter of courtiers. Salai listened to these discussions, silent but present. He'd pick up a discarded sketch, turn it in his hands. Once he asked why I drew the same thing over and over. I told him truth lives in the repetition, in the small shift of light between morning and noon. He nodded, as if he'd known this all along. Stone pathways wound through the close, loose garden, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Moss grew in the cracks between the slabs, soft under bare feet. Ancient chestnut trees cast long shadows, their leaves whispering in the breeze. A stone bench faced the pond, its surface cool even in summer heat. The air carried the scent of thyme crushed underfoot, and the faint sweetness of ripening pears. Water trickled from a simple fountain into a shallow basin, the sound a constant companion. Birds flitted among the branches, their calls blending with the rustle of leaves. This space held time gently, folding hours into days without hurry. I chose vegetarian meals long before it became a habit. The household accounts in Milan list payments for lentils, chickpeas, and greens. No meat appeared on my table. The butchers thought it strange, a painter refusing their trade. But the sight of slaughtered animals unsettled me, the way life left their eyes, the blood soaking into straw. I preferred the quiet company of beans bubbling in a pot, the earthy smell of roasted roots. Salai teased me about it, calling me the herb eater, but he always brought my bowl to the table without complaint. Melzi noted the expenses precisely, never questioning the choice. Food was fuel for the work, nothing more. Sleep came fitfully in my final years, not the deep rest of youth, but a shallow drifting. Melzi adjusted my pillows, his hands sure and gentle. He knew which position eased the stiffness in my neck. Salai built up the fire when the night grew cold, the crackle of wood a soft counterpoint to the silence. I'd watch the flames dance in the hearth, their light playing over the stone walls. The flickering shadows recalled the movement of water, the play of light on stream beds. My right hand lay useless on the blanket, but the left still traced shapes in the air, imaginary lines connecting the fire's glow to the memory of river currents. The Last Supper in Milan showed men reacting to a single moment. Judas's hand near the bread, Peter's knife half raised. I studied faces for months, capturing the flicker of shock, the tightening of lips. Each apostle lived in his own emotional space, yet bound together by the table's geometry. The plaster refused to hold the paint as I wished. It flaked and peeled even as I worked, but the expressions remained true. Melzi later told me pilgrims stood before it for hours, searching the faces as if finding themselves there. The science of perspective framed the human truth. Salai inherited my tools and sketches. He kept the workshop alive, though his own hand never matched the precision I sought. Melzi took the stone pathways wind past orderly rows of herbs and fruit trees here at close loose. The late afternoon sun filters through ancient chestnut leaves, dappling the worn stone bench facing the quiet pond. I sit where the light falls warmest, the scent of rosemary sharp against damp earth. Distant birdsong mingles with the rustle of leaves, a steady counterpoint to the trickle from the carved stone fountain. Water spills over smooth limestone worn by centuries, each drop landing with a sound like my own slowing pulse. Shadows stretch slowly across the grass, long fingers reaching for the empty chair beside the low wooden table. My right hand trembles, too much for the fine work now, a constant palsy since the Milan winters. I watch the pond's reflection of the pale sky, the way ripples distort and smooth the clouds. Some things settle only when the hand is still. The Loire flows beyond the garden wall, its current steady and deep. I studied its currents for the King's Canal designs, plans drawn with my left hand now. Ink blurs where the pen slips, lines less certain than they were in Florence. The canal would have joined Amboise to Blois, a waterway through clay and limestone. I traced its path on parchment this morning, the left hand clumsy but persistent. Water finds its level eventually. It always has. The king visits often, brings apples from his orchards, speaks of hunting. He does not mention the unfinished canals. He understands silence. I remember the Arno's bend near Vinci, how water carved stone over centuries. My fingers trace the rough wood of the table, feeling the grain, the splinters. The fountain's steady drip marks the hours passing. A single dragonfly skims the pond surface, its wings catching the light like stained glass. I watched such wings in the Florentine workshop, studying how light passes through membrane. Verrocchio's studio smelled of linseed oil and stone dust. 40 boys learning to see. I painted the angel's neck on the baptism panel, the curve where light meets shadow. He saw it and set his brush down. I did not know then what he knew. The pond holds the sky's reflection perfectly for a moment before a ripple breaks it. My left hand rests heavy on the table, the fingers curled like old roots. The palsy began subtly, a slight shake when holding a brush too long. Now it settles deep in the bones, a constant hum beneath the skin. I sketch the fountain's base with charcoal, the left hand dragging the stick across paper. Lines waver, edges blur, but the stone's texture emerges rough, porous, marked by water's slow work. It is enough to see the form, to feel the shape beneath the fingers. The virgin of the rocks took years in Milan, layers of glaze building the light within the grotto. I studied how water moves over rock, how light bends in its currents. The figures emerged from shadow as if breathing the damp air. My studies of the heart's chambers informed the virgin's quiet strength, bones and muscle rendered with the certainty of dissection. The Last Supper captured the moment after the words, each apostle's face a separate storm. I watched men eat in taverns, studied how fear twists the mouth, how grief pulls the eyes. The composition held them like water holding a stone. The fountain's trickle matches the rhythm of my breath now. A sparrow lands on the bench arm, pecking at crumbs I left yesterday. Its tiny feet grip the warm stone. It flies when the king's footsteps crunch on the gravel path. He sits without speaking, offers a ripe pear. We watch the pond together. He asks about the birds flying south. I describe the curve of a wing in descent, the angle that catches the wind. He nods, understanding the mechanics. The garden was a refuge, this quiet space near Amboise. The king gave me rooms in the check too, but I preferred close Luce's stone walls and its familiar smells. Rosemary, damp clay, the tang of the fountain's limestone. Here, the light is soft, forgiving. It does not demand finished work. The canal plans lie rolled on the table, tied with faded blue cord. They will not be built. The king has other wars. My left hand sketches the cord's knot, the frayed ends. It is practice for holding the pen. The pond reflects the chestnut leaves, a mosaic of green and gold. I remember the Arno's gray-green flow, how eddies form behind stones near Florence. 50 years of drawing rivers. The hand forgets, but the eye remembers. Shadows lengthen across the grass, merging with the cool shade under the trees. The air grows still, holding the day's warmth. Distant church bells mark the hour, their sound muffled by leaves. A single bat flits near the pond, its path erratic against the darkening sky. The fountain's drip slows as the stone cools. I feel the weight of the garden settling into night. The empty chair beside me holds the fading light. The wooden writing table sits quiet now, its surface scarred by ink and knife. A single sheet of paper rests there, weighted by a smooth river stone. Left-handed sketches of water droplets falling into the pond, each circle expanding, overlapping. The charcoal lines are hesitant, smudged at the edges. A half-empty inkwell glints in the last sun, the dried residue around its rim like ancient lava. The scent of iron gall. Ink mixes with the rosemary drifting through the open window. A worn leather pouch holds spare quills, their tips split from constant use. The table's grain is deeply grooved where the pen was tested, a map of small frustrations. Cool stone floors anchor the room, absorbing the day's heat. Distant hills blur into the evening haze, beyond the open shutters. Cicadas hum their steady rhythm, a sound that has marked time since Vinci. The fountain's drip becomes the only sound in the deepening dusk. The king left an hour ago, his footsteps fading along the path. My right hand lies still in my lap, the tremor less noticeable in the dim light. I think of the Milan workshop, the smell of wet plaster before painting began. How Verrocchio tested metal alloys, the sharp scent of acid etching copper plates. The baptism angel's wing took weeks, layering thin glazes to catch the light. He saw the life in it, the breath. The Last Supper's figures moved with the weight of real men, their robes pulled by gravity. I studied the muscles of a clenched fist in the market square, how tendons stood out like cords. The geological layers in the Virgin's grotto came from examining river cliffs near Florence. The strata telling ancient stories. Water-shaped stone, stone-shaped water. The fountain's stone basin was carved by a local mason, its surface worn smooth by constant flow. My notebooks hold thousands of pages, observations on flight, light, the flow of blood. Each page a step in understanding. The king once asked why I drew everything. I showed him a single leaf, how its veins mirrored river systems. He understood then. The pond reflects only darkness now, a black mirror holding the stars. The fountain's drip echoes in the stillness. I feel the cool stone of the bench through my robe. The air carries the scent of night, blooming jasmine from the far wall. My left hand rests on the rough wood of the table, the fingers tracing old scratches. The palsy is a constant companion of vibration in the bones. It does not matter. The work was never about the hand. It was about the seeing. The lawyer's current flows beyond the garden wall, steady and deep. It will outlast the canals, the kings, the drawings. A single candle burns low in the church, window across the field. A small yellow eye in the dark. The sound of water falling is the sound of time settling. I left 13,000 pages of notes. The exact count was made after. They found the sketches tucked in chests, rolled in oilcloth, hidden in drawers. The candle flame dips, then steadies. Shadows dance on the garden wall, tall figures moving slowly. The pond holds the reflection of the stars, clear and cold. My breathing slows to match the fountain's rhythm. The dragonfly I watched this morning is gone. The empty chair sits silent beside me. The last light fades from the chestnut leaves. The fountain stone feels warm where the sun lingered longest. I remember the Arno's Bend near Vinci, the way the water turned the corner. It is enough. The air is cool now, smelling of dew and distant wood smoke. The stars are sharp above the Lawyer Valley. The fountain's drip marks the final hours. Each drop a small certainty in the dark. My left hand rests on the table, still. The garden breathes around me, slow and deep. Shadows merge into the night. The pond holds everything. The stars are sharp above the Lawyer Valley. The fountain's drip marks the final hours. Each drop a small certainty in the dark. My left hand rests on the table, still. The garden breathes around me, slow and deep. Shadows merge into the night. The pond holds everything. The notebooks scattered after Melzi's death. Pages drifted into Spanish cabinets, Windsor Castle vaults, Milanese archives. I recall the scent of linseed oil and damp clay clinging to those pages. A single sheet lay open on a drafting table near Amboise, walnut shavings dusting its corner. Cool stone walls held the quiet of a room where time measured itself in drying paint layers. Room where time measured itself in drying paint layers. Sunlight warmed the worn wood grain beneath my fingers. Melzi meant to organize them, to bind the fragments into sense. He carried the weight of my chaos. After I could no longer lift the charcoal, the task overwhelmed him. The papers slipped away like river silt through loose fingers. Some landed in damp chests where mildew claimed the edges. Others dried brittle in dry cabinets, their ink fading to ghostly traces. Francis, I kept the Mona Lisa close after I left Amboise. He hung it in his private chamber at Fontainebleau. I saw it there the last spring, propped on an easel near the window. Her smile held the same quiet patience as always. The landscape behind her face still carried the memory of Arno Valley erosion. Sunlight caught dust motes above the drafting table. She traveled with me from Florence, across the Alps, through years of refinement. Her expression emerged slowly, layer by layer of glaze, mimicking the soft transitions of natural sight. The king understood her value, though he could not name why. He spoke of her presence, not her technique. She remained unfinished in the way all true things remain, only continued. Scholars counted 13,000 pages. Eventually, the count came centuries later. Long after Melzi's hope had faded, they found sketches for wings, based on sparrow flight, notes on water vortices, studies of a dissected human heart. Each page breathed the same air as my studio. The close Lucé garden rested in late afternoon light. Stone pathways wound past orderly rows of rosemary and pear trees. Ancient chestnut leaves filtered the sun onto a small pond. A stone bench faced the water, its surface worn smooth by time and touch. The air carried the scent of thyme, crushed underfoot. I sat there often, watching dragonflies skim the surface. Their flight paths informed the wing designs, sketched beside anatomical studies. Nothing existed in isolation. The garden, the pond, the dragonflies, all fed the patient work. The Louvre holds her now behind thick glass. Visitors press close, searching for the secret in her smile. They do not see the years of observation in the landscape behind her. They miss the subtle modeling of light across her cheek, born from watching river eddies form and dissolve. The fame grew slowly, like lichen on old stone. It swelled most fiercely in the 19th century, long after my bones turned to dust. Men in top hats declared me a solitary genius, a myth they needed for their own age. They ignored the workshop stone dust, the shared turpentine smell, the 40 hands learning to see. My name became a symbol, stripped of the quiet room by the Arno. The myth drowned the reality of patient looking. A specific notebook rests in Madrid's royal palace. Its pages smell faintly of vinegar, used to preserve the ink. One sheet shows a detailed study of a human spine, next to calculations for a canal lock. The spine drawing bears the smudge of a thumbprint, mine or Melzi's. The lock design includes notes on sediment flow, observed near Vinci. The page feels thin, fragile as dried river clay. Sunlight, through the palace window, catches the fine lines of the vertebrae. The spine curves with the same rhythm as the Arno's bends. Such connections were never forced. They simply existed, waiting for eyes trained to see. Time seemed suspended in that room, measured only by the slow drying of ink. Later artists copied my compositions, mimicking the pyramid structures, the distant horizons. They studied the sfumato, the soft edges where light meets shadow. Few understood it was not a trick, but a way of seeing. It mirrored how the eye truly perceives the world. A soft merging, not sharp lines. My anatomical drawings revealed the heart's chambers, the hand's tendons. Surgeons used them, artists studied them. The knowledge flowed like water finding its course. Each field fed the other. Optics-informed painting, hydraulics-shaped landscape studies. The connection between seeing and understanding remained the quiet core. It was never about invention alone. The French court provided peace for my final work. I refined old ideas under the chestnut trees. I watched ants carry crumbs across sun-warmed stone. Their paths held lessons for machine gears. King Francis visited often. Asking questions, I answered slowly. He respected the silence between thoughts. I carried the Mona Lisa until the end. She was a companion, not merely a painting. I died in 1519, leaving sketches unfinished, theories untested. The legacy was not planned. It emerged from decades of looking, layer upon layer. An ambient passage near the Louvre closes at dusk. The gallery empties, leaving only the low hum of climate control. Moonlight glints off the protective glass over the Mona Lisa. Her smile holds steady in the dimness. Dust motes drift slowly in the last shafts of evening light. The stone floor feels cool beneath the silent benches. Distant footsteps echo in the marble halls, fading toward the sign. The air carries the faint smell of old wood and wax. Only the painting remains awake, watching the empty room. The notebook's true legacy lies not in the flying machines or canals. It lives in the insistence that observation is creation. To see a river's turn, a bird's wing, the play of light on skin. This was the work. The pages gathered dust, then fame, then scholarly scrutiny. They outlasted the men who handled them. Melzi's grief, the king's curiosity, the 19th century's myth-making, all faded. The paper endured, holding the quiet evidence of a life spent looking. The strangeness of the work persists because it refuses easy answers. It simply shows what was seen. I left no grand pronouncements, only the traces of patient attention. The Mona Lisa's smile endures because it mirrors the world's own ambiguity. The landscape behind her holds the slow work of water and time. My hand learned to follow nature's rhythms, not impose its will. The notebooks scattered, yet the act of looking remained constant. It began by the Arno, continued in Milan, deepened in France. Some things cannot be finished, only continued. The light in Vinci, the stone walls, the olive trees, all part of the same patient study. The legacy is the looking itself, complete, nothing more to say.